Hi, and welcome to the Town of Granby Youth Service Bureau's YouTube channel and our Parent Like a Pro series. Today, I'm just going to briefly give you the introduction on what this series is all about and the foundations that it's built on. We're getting this information out there for you in a variety of ways. This is the YouTube series, which is going to just take that boring old PowerPoint presentation, but get the facts out there in a way that you can take your time with. Take notes if you want to, make it a little bit easier to catch the references and things like that. We are also going to be following each of these presentations up with a very short podcast that is going to be a conversation about the topics covered in it. And on Tuesday evenings, we are presenting a series in a set of 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks of a parenting series that builds on these foundations. And that is a Zoom group that parents can reach out to the agency and sign up for, and you get the link. And each night in that series, we're going to be covering one of the topics that we go over, all falling back onto these foundations that we're going over tonight. So I'm going to dive in. Here's our Parenting Like a Pro series, Foundations. So the YSB focuses on 5 key parenting components, and we've pulled these from a plethora of different parenting self-help books and research and classes that are out there. And we found that there are 5 key repeating themes that really are found in almost all of the models that are talking about how to improve our parenting. Parenting is easier when we take care of ourselves. Why? Because when we take care of ourselves, we can better maintain our calm and caring approach and not parent from anger and frustration. We are better able to maintain our consistency when we're taking care of ourselves and we're not exhausted or stressed or overwhelmed when we're trying to parent. We're able to think and set logical and enforceable limits and boundaries and consequences for our kids to learn from. And finally, it allows our kids to learn from the mistakes they make, the consequences that they have to live through, and help them learn to make better choices and always think about what the consequences of their actions might be. And hey, that puts us on the road to raising a responsible and logical adult who is going to evaluate the risks of their behaviors. And that's really what we want to do. We want to raise an independent and responsible child to become an independent and responsible adult. All right, we have to start with self-care. I know some of you are rolling your eyes already, but self-care is really vital. As parents, we are the most important member of our child's family. I know that sometimes goes against the grain. I remember reading in a book by Hal Runkle called Scream-Free Parenting. He would talk about how he used to talk to clients and ask them who was the most important person in your family, and they would say their children. And certainly as a parent myself, I get that. To me, my child, my children, I'm now an empty nester, but they were the most important. My job was to care for them. However, what he pointed out is that we really need to take care of ourselves first. It's just like on the airplane when they drop that oxygen mask and they tell you you need to put it on yourself before you put it on your child, because if you don't get it on yourself and you pass out, your child is not going to be able to get it on themselves. That's the same thing in most of our day in and day out endeavors. We are providing the food, clothing, and shelter, the basic needs, as well as the secondary needs that are so important to our children. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we put ourselves at risk, and we are at risk of not being able to care for our kids. So they need us to survive, and we have to take steps to care for ourselves, both physically and emotionally, in order to be the best parents that we can be. Secondly, if we're yelling, we're already losing the battle. If we're angry, if we yell and scream, we're not thinking clearly. Anger and anxiety, we get taken over by the amygdala. That part of our brain is very reactive. Our kids are either going to tune us out because we're crazy and overreacting, and they know that a backpack or something left on the floor isn't worth screaming about, or they're going to be afraid of us. And neither is a really good learning tool. So one of the things we will practice self-care for is to learn how to clear our heads, take time to think before we parent, before we step into the problems awaiting us when we get home from school or from work and the kids get home from school, and be able to be calmer and thus parent more effectively. Reactive parents parent emotionally, not effectively. So that is one of the reasons we focus on self-care. Consistently inconsistent. 99.9% of parents are not 100% consistent. I think we all know that we're supposed to be consistent, and we do. We need to strive for consistency. And when we find ourselves in a situation where our kids are arguing, negotiating, begging, or manipulating us, it means we have taught them that this can work out some of the time. So when problems pop up, it is going to be helpful to take a moment and think about why our kids thought this would be a good way to act. Enforceable consequences that make sense is one of our last pillars. What is an enforceable consequence and what isn't? We're going to talk about this in detail. But if we threaten to ground our child forever, you miss curfew, you're grounded forever. All right, that's an unenforceable consequence. If we have a habit of setting consequences that we really aren't going to enforce, if you don't stop misbehaving, I'm not taking you to grandma's this weekend. And if in the back of your head you know you're going to take them to grandma's no matter what they do, we need to stop using those kinds of statements as our consequences. Because if we do, we are going to raise children that don't expect us to enforce the consequences, and they're going to carry that out into the community and think that other consequences are not going to be enforced on them. And eventually are going to hit that wall, and that police officer or that lawyer on the other side is going to enforce a consequence that might not be an affordable one for them to make. So the thinking parent only sets consequences that they can enforce. And sometimes, as we'll talk about in one of our later classes, it can take real planning to figure out, is this enforceable? What help do I need to enforce this consequence? Can I do this, or should I come up with a different one? And also, a little tip here that we'll talk about in that later on class. If you can't think of a consequence on the spot, that's okay. You can just say, this is a problem and there's going to be consequences. I'll let you know once I've had a chance to think about it. But something needs to be done about this. And that's something, if we're being consistent with our kids, is going to be a little bit scary for them. I know that this comes out of a presentation that Jim Fay does in the Love and Logic programs. He talks about how the kids will go, no, not something, Mom. When the mother says, I'm going to have to do something about this. And they're like, no, not something. That's awful. Because they have learned that consistently this parent is going to enforce a consequence, and she may not know what the consequence is, but the kids are not necessarily going to want to experience that consequence. And really, we want our kids to make mistakes. I know, what, really? But we do. Because making mistakes that are affordable to make and dealing with the consequences of those mistakes are what are going to prepare our children for being responsible and independent adults. So an affordable mistake is, a child not picking up their toys and the parent clearing up the toys, and maybe they don't get to play with them for a period of time. They can be sad about that, but they're going to survive. Another affordable consequence, and this is one that I had to think about myself personally. My kiddo, my oldest, was pretty disorganized, and we put a lot of effort into, checking his backpack, making sure things were ready to go to school in the morning. But I would get these phone calls, not every day, but not almost never, that said, oh, Mom, I forgot my so-and-so at home. Can you bring it in? I need it for third period. And for a while I was doing that. And then as we, at work got more into looking at letting our children learn from their mistakes, I realized that, what? Him leaving that stuff at home wasn't my problem. And I wasn't supposed to be the solution to that. My problem, my responsibility was making sure that he had a place for all of his things, of helping him the night before to become organized, to ask him, do you have everything in your backpack? Are you ready for, school tomorrow morning? Those were parenting responsibilities. But once that was done, once he said, yeah, I've got everything, and, no, I didn't need any more help, my job was done. I got him up in the morning, he went off to school, and it was his job to have everything that he needed. And I started saying, no, I'm sorry, hon, I've got to get to work. I can't bring your paper in. And it made him become much more responsible, because those first couple of times, he had to deal with the teacher and say, I forgot it at home. And he didn't like that. And it helped him bring a little bit more responsibility to that organization. So we can very easily fall into stressing about protecting our kids from the consequence of their small mistakes, but we don't want to. We want to let them make those mistakes. So next time, we're going to take a more in-depth look at self-care. And we're really hoping that if you join us for the YouTube presentation, or you drop into the Tuesday night class, or you listen to our podcast, that you walk away from those experiences with some real life tips on how to bring some wellness into your life, with the goal of being able to parent from a calmer and more rational place. And we're going to look at ways to translate mindfulness, anxiety management, meditation into real life practical things that can help you walk in that door after work if you're a working parent, or get those kids off the bus and be ready to parent calmly and non-reactively. So thanks for joining us. I hope that some of what I've had to say was a little thought-provoking, or added something to your body of knowledge. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach us at 860-844-5355, or email us at ahcox@granby-ct.gov. We also have a Facebook page, or you can check out the Town of Granby website for links to our podcasts, our YouTube presentations, and information about the general programs that we offer, including our counseling services. That website is www.granby-ct.gov/youth-services. All right, till next time.